Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We're joined today by Jason Sitterud of Granite Bay High School, where he is the varsity boys basketball coach. He is the assistant athletic director. He is the varsity girls golf coach, and he teaches English. Thanks for being here, Coach. Much appreciated.
Hey, glad to be here. Honored to be on this show.
Well, we are, for those of you that watch the video component of this, we're recording this episode in Boston, Massachusetts. We just landed. Hustled to the hotel to get this thing done. I appreciate you taking the time today, Coach. I know it's the 4th of July and all. But
it's in between activities. Hit some golf balls earlier. Gonna go paddleboarding later, so this is perfect.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you from that, so let's dive right in. If you don't mind, can you help me and the audience understand your background? How did you get into coaching? How did you land your first head coaching job? Any others? I mean, you got 2 right now. But kind of take us through that journey as we got to where we are now.
I grew up in Roseville, California, and I attended Oakmont High School. My dad was big into sports, and so I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and that's just kind of what we did. I played football, soccer, basketball, and golf.
Wait. Had kids or played sports?
Yeah.
There's 5 of you. I mean, that's just what we do.
That's what we do. We just play sports. So
okay,
we're
got
it. Practice, and it was always a lot of fun. So just kind of grew up in a very sports-dominated household, and had a great experience at Oakmont High School. Had some great coaches there. Gary Donnell was my varsity coach for basketball, and really enjoyed that. And from there, I went to Brigham Young University out in Provo, Utah. And initially, I went there, and I had a desire to be a business major and work in the stock market, all that good stuff. It just kind of the late 80s. It sounded really cool. But then after my freshman year, I decided to serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so I was called to serve in the England Bristol mission. And I served there from 89 to 91 and had a great experience out there and really enjoyed the people. And it kind of gave me a different perspective on life. I really enjoyed teaching and working with people. And so when I came back to BYU, I decided to go into education. And I thought, I love sports. I love English. And so decided to major in English and hopefully give me an opportunity to coach. And so when I graduated from BYU, I came back here to Roseville, and I finished getting my teacher credential out here. And it was an assistant varsity coach for Gary Donnell at Oakmont High School for 1 year. And then I was just kind of in between, hopefully waiting for Granite Bay to open up, hopefully get a job out there. So my wife and I wanted to live by the ocean. And so we applied to a variety of places and got a job at Gonzales High School out there by Monterey. And I coached girls varsity basketball there for 1 year. And that was a eye-opening experience, to say the least. Loved the girls. It was kind of cool to see how much they appreciated what was going on in the various places we got to go and travel to. It made me appreciate the little things in life. And then from there, Granite Bay opened up, and I was fortunate enough to get a job teaching English and coaching basketball with Brunell Pinkerton. He was the first varsity head coach out there. And so he's able to get me on board. And the second year, girls golf started. And so I was able to be the first girls golf coach there. So I've been coaching girls golf for about 22, 23 years since the inception. And I coached at all levels with Brunell Pinkerton. I coached, I was assistant varsity, freshman head coach, JV head coach, just kind of bounced around. I coached under him. I coached under David Bills and Gwen Boggs. And then about 15, 16 years ago, I had the opportunity to be the varsity coach. And so I've been double dipping ever since, coaching boys varsity basketball and girls golf.
Fascinating. And you learn something new on these things every time. I did not know you did a stint at Gonzales High School. And for those people listening, if you wanted to check the map, Coach said he wanted to be by the ocean, and Gonzales is about 45-minute drive from the ocean in the Salinas Valley, the heartland there. But it's a little different culture than Granite Bay, wouldn't you say?
It was a lot different. It definitely made me appreciate where I am today. Although I love the people out there. The kids were great. They were so hardworking. And we go play Carmel High and PG, and they were just excited to see the ocean, and just their eyes were open to various things. That same year, the Warriors were in San Jose. And so we were able to take a few of the girls. I had 3 sisters, and they all loved Penny Hardaway. And so we're able to get a group of the girls, get tickets to go see Penny Hardaway play, Orlando play the Warriors. And so we get out of the van and I hear this cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And I'm like, what do you guys have in your pockets? And they're all, we've got pennies. And so in their mind, whenever Penny scored or had an amazing assist, they were going to throw pennies. And so I quickly asked them to please, empty your pockets out. And they recognized it's not really the appropriate thing to do in an NBA game, but just they were excited. We stood by the gate when the players ran out and Penny came out and gave them all a high five. And that was one of the coolest things I've seen.
That's an awesome story. Great way to start. Let me ask you this. So you went to Oakmont, which I don't know if you would consider that a rival school at this point, but Roseville High School in Oakmont and Wood Creek existed before Granite Bay. And you say you're waiting for Granite Bay to open because that would be a great job. What factored into that decision, which pivoted you away from, hey, we want to try to live by the coast?
I just, I love Roseville. I love the area. Granite Bay kids were coming to Oakmont when I was there. And I've kind of grown up here and it's been part of my family. And, I knew it'd be a great place to raise a family. So I knew there'd be some job opportunities there. And fortunately, I had a lot of good people that I had as teachers. Brunell Pinkerton and David Bills, they worked hard to get me on there. And I'm always in them to kind of get me at a good foundation for the rest of my life here.
Mm-hmm. So you got the girls' golf job before you became a head coach for the basketball team. So let's start there. What did you realize? Well, first of all, I coached the golf team at El Camino for 5 years. So we'll come back to that in a second. But what did you realize when you got into being a head coach that you needed to figure out sooner than later so that you could best serve your athletes? What were the eye-opening moments in that transition as you took that job on?
I think with girls golf especially, it was brand new. And so just understanding that the quality of golfers we were getting were very, very new to the game, and obviously a lot of patience. And what I love about coaching the girls is they love to be coached. They're just sponges, and you can give them 2 or 3 basics or fundamentals to work on, and they would do it for a half hour. If you ask girls to work on their putting and give them a few drills, they would do it, no questions asked. And that was the thing I guess I learned immediately is if you're specific in your instruction, they'll take it in and apply it. And there was, they would question a few things here and there, but they wanted to learn and they wanted to get better. And that was kind of the cool thing to see. And they were always there helping each other. Guys are a little more individualistic, whereas the girls are more excited when they have a good time and other girls are successful. So that was one of the things I learned early on.
What about leading the program? What were things that you had to figure out in order to be successful in whatever way you wanted to define that? And I would imagine with a bunch of novice golfers that there were some lumps taken early on, but what about management? What did you learn about that as you stepped into this role?
I think utilizing how to manage the golf course itself. And that, we're fortunate Granite Bay Country Club has been a huge supporter of our program. And so how do you maximize 10 to 12 girls utilizing driving range, the putting green, the chipping area, and how do you help them get the most of those things? Is when you're on the putting green, we did rotations, and so we'd have 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and 20 minutes there. And so the girls knew when they're putting, they're working on these drills. When they're hitting, they're working on these things. When they're chipping, they're working on these things. And just really breaking things down to make it as simple as possible. We recognize when certain girls were athletic, they picked it up a little quicker. And those that were not as athletic, we had to be much more intentional in our instruction and focus on the small things in order to create big things. And obviously the biggest thing with girls is just helping them, they can play fast. They can walk and talk at the same time. They love to chat. And I love that about girls. But once we got them moving, it was awesome.
So you mentioned that the boys piece can be a little bit different. But before we get into the comparison there and coaching different gendered athletes, because I want to be careful about generalizations and things of that and speak only to your experience. But I also would like to know the journey from coming in as an assistant coach and what you learned there in your first attempt at it, essentially after you got back to the school, but also how you transitioned to being the head coach. What were the steps involved in that? What opportunities were there that didn't work out? And then what ultimately worked out, and take us through that.
When I initially came back to Granite Bay High School and worked with Mel Pinkerton, we talked a lot, and I just said, I want to know their program. My goal was to kind of coach at every level to get an idea. And so and he was great at that. His goal was he always wanted people around him that wanted to be head coaches. And I always appreciated that. And so if I asked him, hey, if I'm coaching varsity with you, can I work on the scouting or work on the offense or the defense? And he'd give me various assignments. Even as the head freshman coach, he'd outline what he wanted, and it gave me a chance to apply those things and really understand what does a freshman skill level look like. And then I coached the JV. What does a JV skill set look like? And how can we get a freshman to get that basic foundation of what we're working on and teaching, and then build upon that the JV year. So when they come to varsity year, they have an understanding. A lot of times he was running kind of a quasi old school motion offense, and the dribble drive was slowly kind of coming around. And so we would spend time at the freshman level teaching dribble drive, at the JV level teaching motion. And so when they got to him, they hopefully had that foundation of both offenses, so they could apply whatever he needed them to do based upon the skill set of the team. And that was, I think, the biggest thing I learned is just how to develop players early on, and giving your freshman JV coaches the freedom to do what they want to do, also within the confines of what you need them to do. He needed me to teach them how to handle the ball and read screens and come off screens, but I could still kind of have some of my sets and some flexibility to try some things I like to do also. And I always appreciated that.
So when Bernie left, and you said David Bills came in, what was the process for that happening? And then Boggs coming in after, before you finally were able to step into that role? Were you involved in those discussions? Was it kind of an automatic deal? How did that shake out before you ultimately landed there?
Coach Bills was kind of the next in line, I guess you could say. And so he took over when Coach Pinkerton left. And then Coach Bills was there for 1 year. And then they opened the job up, and I applied, and Coach Boggs applied, and they gave the job to Coach Boggs, and he had a great pedigree coming from the Bay Area. And so, obviously you're obviously a little bummed, but Coach Boggs was really great about making the transition. And we kind of, obviously there's some growing pains here and there, but I learned to kind of look at him as another learning experience, to learn from him, because he was very different. He was more set based, a little more structured in how we did certain things. And so I've always loved to learn the game of basketball or learn the game of golf. And so just nice to be able to sit and see what he did well, and just kind of how can I take those concepts and apply it to what I want to do in the future. And so it actually worked out to be a good experience.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because often the people listening, hopefully the target audience was, people getting into this, or people shifting jobs, or people just kind of trying to sharpen their toolbox a little bit here. But disappointment when being told, hey, we're going a different direction. And there's a couple different responses you probably could have had at that time. Why did you make the choice you did to stick around and learn and be part of that staff versus like, you know what, you guys chose somebody else, I'm just going to sit in the background? And how did that closed door, so to speak, become an opportunity for you later that actually may have set you up for greater success?
Honestly, I think a lot had to do with my family. I have 3 kids, and they were all relatively young still. And I know they wanted to come to Granite Bay, and I wanted to be there with them at Granite Bay High School. And so that, having that long-term picture, knowing that they were going to be there someday, and I was still pretty young in the game, and so I had many years to go, helped a little bit. It also gave me an opportunity to get more involved in the teaching aspect. I was the English department head for a couple of years during that time period, which helped me kind of gain a better understanding of how the school worked. How do you set up schedules? How does a master schedule look? How do you help students do these certain processes? And so it gave me a bigger picture of the school itself, not only athletically, but academically. And that really, as I look back now, it was a blessing. Obviously, at the time, you're a little frustrated, a little bummed, but just having that big picture kind of mindset really helped. And just knowing that my kids were going to be there eventually, and I still could work with them. They would come to the camps I was doing or running with Coach Boggs in the high school there. And so that helped a lot, because I guess, my attitude was, Granite Bay has helped raise my family. And it was a great place to raise a family, being on campus all day and having a gym for the kids to hang out in, the football games to go to, and the baseball games. And it was just being part of a bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you remember when Brandon was on, and he actually said closed doors are blessings. And it seems like you tapped into that concept there and were able to really look at the big picture of where you wanted to be and play the long game. And now you're sitting in a situation where not only are you coaching two varsity sports, you're also working with athletics, you're still teaching, you have your hands in a lot of different departments in the school, which makes me wonder, and I don't know if you can capture this in a way that's digestible for the audience, but how would you say that the cross-disciplinary utility of all of those different hats enhances your ability to do each one of those jobs? Meaning, how does coaching golf, which happens to be the opposite gender, inform your approach as a basketball coach, and vice versa? How does your work in the athletic department inform your coaching of each of those sports, vice versa? How does your role in the classroom inform those? If you could kind of try and maybe break that down in whatever way serves you, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I guess I'll go being a teacher first. That's obviously why we got into, is to teach and to work with young people and be able to see the work ethic of our student athletes at Granite Bay High School was huge, because they are very academic driven, and that's kind of their first priority. And so it's good for me to see what they go through and kind of the grind they go through. They have aspirations of going to these prestigious schools, and it's not easy. They invest a lot of time and energy into their studies. They've got 3-4 hours of homework. They're taking, 3 or 4 or 5 AP classes. And so they are students first. And so I think being an English teacher and being a department head and understanding how the school works, maybe realize that's always the first priority, is our kids are academically oriented, and how can we help them achieve their goals through their athletics once they build that foundation. And I think go from there to the coaching girls golf is this past year, we had a great team. We were fortunate to win the state title this past year. And, coaching that group of girls, it was fun to see because, once again, they're very academically motivated. We missed 5 to 6 Mondays in a row for all the playoff tournaments. But these girls always put their academics first. They'd bring their books with them in the vans. We'd stay overnight at places. They would make sure they get their homework done. They'd talk to teachers ahead of time. And so it was a great reminder to see that, they, even though they're doing these great things, it's still about academics. And just seeing how, even though golf's an individual sport, the girls get really excited for each other. And they know, they kind of learned early on that I'm not shoot my best today, but the other girls will pick me up. And then maybe they're having a bad day, but I'll pick them up the next day. And they really kind of rally around each other because they do play a lot of tournaments all over the place throughout the year. But high school is a little bit more unique, and that we're trying to teach them to be part of a team. And once they embrace that team aspect, it's pretty cool to see what they can do and how they can learn from that. And I think that kind of transitions now to with coaching boys basketball. You kind of have all those things now kind of come together, and understanding that, we have 2 hours of practice. We're in an intense part of the season during the league, and my kids might be a little bit off that day. And it's not because they don't want to be there, but they just had 2 AP tests, and they've got another AP test tomorrow. And so they're trying to compartmentalize all their academics, yet also trying to take in the scouting report and get ready for the big games that night. And so it just, having all those things help me prioritize what's important. How do we structure our practices to maximize our time so they can get in and out and still be effective, and yet get their homework done and still have a life outside the basketball court?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's important for all of us to keep in mind, is how do we keep the main thing for our students? And depending where we are, it might be different, but our school, as you know, is very academically oriented as well. And we've actually made a conscious choice that 90 minutes, like that's all you get, figure it out. And if you can't, then get better as a coach.
And that's just, it's about, I guess, prioritizing time. And that's what I've learned more than anything else, is I don't want to waste their time. And is how can we maximize it? And we're fortunate we've got an athletic PE class. We have most of our kids in there, and we can get a lot of shots up and do a lot of our fundamental skill work there. And then our practice is more team oriented. So once again, we try to go, for example, school gets out at 2:30. We usually have practice at 5. so they can go home, get their studies done, come to practice for a little bit, have a little bit of a break, and then hit the books once again. But to have both, even in golf and basketball, our team GPAs are over 4.0, much like your school probably, and it's just that reminds you just how academically motivated they are, and it also helped having my kids go through the program. I have 2 boys and a younger daughter. Both my boys played in our program, played for me. My daughter, I was able to watch and support, and that helped me kind of see things through a parent's eyes also, and recognize maybe I asked too much sometimes, and maybe I need to make sure I do this and do this. And until you have your kids go through the program, you don't really understand what it takes sometimes.
I love that. We're going to come back to that, but I want to ask a question first before we get off this idea of you kind of cross-pollinating your programs through all the different points of contact you have. What's the best thing that you do in your program that you think adds to the culture you're trying to build? And I would love it if there's something that you do with both groups because it's that important to you.
I guess our mantra has always been family. Whenever we huddle up, we always yell family. And I think the guys and the girls and the students that have me understand how important that is, because my family obviously is the most important thing. I've got an amazing wife who's very supportive and great kids. And, my guys know sometimes golf crosses over about 3 weeks usually. And so I'm kind of double dipping, and my guys understand that. They get excited for my girls and they see them on campus. For example, at halftime of one of our games in December this past season, we celebrated the girls golf team and their state title. And it was cool to see all my guys so excited for the girls. And then my girls will come out to our basketball games and be very supportive of the guys. And so we try to help them see both successes. And it's just, obviously it's very different, the dynamics of the teams, but it was kind of cool to get the girls recognition at the basketball game, to kind of see the fans and see the crowds and experience that, because they only get that on the golf course. And for my guys to see what hard work and how dedication pays off and to achieve certain goals you have. And so that's kind of a cool thing to see.
As an athletic administrator, you get an opportunity to not just supervise games, but to be part of the leadership of the department, to shape mission and vision, to, help coaches and teams achieve that mission and vision that you're laying out. And so you get to see a lot of this. What are some things that you've been able to observe over the years of your colleagues, or maybe friends that coach at other schools, that are not basketball and are not golf, that you've been able to steal and implement into your approach of coaching the 2 sports that you coach?
I think it's been the mindset. It's kind of been the mindset shift for the last probably 5 years, is going from a transactional coach to a transformative coach. And that's what I've kind of noticed in our football program, in our baseball program, in our soccer program, in aquatics, is our coaches are very invested in the person first, and then the result comes later on. I admire Coach Cooper. He's our football coach, and he was there for many years as the head coach. Now he's an assistant coach, but he's had a transformative effect on the players that played for him. They all come back. They all support him. He keeps in contact with them. But it was much more not about football, but life and life experiences. And you see that in the aquatics. I admire the aquatics. I mean, they were there at 6 a.m. in the pool swimming. They're there at 3:30, swimming again. They're there back at 7 o'clock swimming. And you have to have special relationships with these kids to want to come swimming every day and just go down and back. I always ask the girls, how do you guys do that? How do you guys go down and back just following a line? It's just what they do. But it's the relationships the coaches have with them and the desire the kids have to want to perform. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's just the transformative coaches we have on our campus that are willing to share what their experiences and what they see.
Yeah, I love that answer. And it seems to be, Joe Ehrman, you're probably familiar, right? I forget the guy's name that wrote the book about him. And then he came out with this book himself, Inside Out Coaching. But it seems to be an approach that a lot of people in our generation, at least, has shifted over to, right? I'm sure if we all had a time machine and went back and watched ourselves when we were young, we would have some issues with that. But you mentioned earlier that watching your kids go through the program, and I'm not just talking about your basketball program, I'm talking about the school, watching them be coached by other people if they happen to play more than one sport, probably hammered that approach home even more so for you. But what were you able to learn watching other people lead and guide your children that you were able to then maybe implement for you, or maybe use that as an example of how you may potentially want to do it differently?
I think the biggest thing the biggest change that we've seen obviously is before you tell a kid to jump, they say how high. Now you ask a kid to jump and they ask why. And I think that's what I saw with my kids initially is, hey, you guys need to do this. And they're like, no, and they're like, why? So you have to explain why. And then I was able to watch other coaches, they're a little bit younger and more experienced in that situation, explain the why. And before they start teaching a certain subject or a certain function in the practice, they explain why they're doing it. If they're, working on certain pass routes in football, it's not, get from A to B, but this is why I need you to run this way. This is why I need you to change your speeds here and plant your foot here. And I think seeing the detailed approach and the why has definitely helped me, because I know it helps my kids. They saw that. And when I asked them, hey, what'd you learn today? What'd you guys work on today? They could explain in detail why they did what they did. And that was a good reminder for me when I do, coach golf or coach basketball, to be more specific in my instruction and more detailed and not assume things. And I think that was the biggest thing. We assume kids know certain things when in reality they don't.
So how do you then, when you, and I don't know anything about your team last year or coming back this year, but let's just say at some point in your career over 20 years, you've had a team coming back that returned the majority of your core players. How do you then hold yourself accountable to make sure that you don't try to jump the line, so to speak, in your teaching process, and remember to start at the beginning and explain the why, even though you may feel like, well, we've already done that, we should be able to skip ahead a little bit? And I ask because I ran into that a few years ago and had to essentially reset. And I would say, in hindsight, lost a couple of weeks that I could have had if I had just always remembered, hey, we're going to start at A instead of L, regardless of the year.
And I think what's helped me the most is having my seniors explain to the younger guys how we do certain things. Because I'll assume certain things, and my guys will say, hey, coach, they don't know this, or hey, they haven't seen that concept yet. And so I think having that relationship with the seniors, first of all, and have the open line of communication always helps. And just, especially in the spring and summer, it's giving the seniors a chance to coach and seniors a chance to instruct and to lead. And that reminds me what we need to cover. For example, this past summer, we only had 2 returners playing a lot of our summer games. And so we'd be on the same page, but the other 8 guys weren't. And so we'd look around like, why aren't you, and it's like, okay, I need you to make sure you teach him how to do this. You teach him how to do this. I'll work on this. And we kind of work together to help the young guys out. And that was a good reminder. It's just, we've got to be intentional. And I think the basketball IQ sometimes is a little bit lost because of the Instagrams and YouTubes. Everything's kind of very quick, and they watch the ball rather than watching what happens away from the ball. And so how do you help kids see what happens away and understand the process? And just having great seniors understand that leadership role. And that's something I know I'm going to try to do better this year, is keep having senior leadership and moving forward from there.
Absolutely. So let me follow with this, with both your senior leadership or your returners, if you have maybe sophomores that play on the team, and your staff, right? You talked about how Pinkerton and Bills and Boggs all gave you specific assignments, tried to grow you as a coach. How do you intentionally do that with both your players and your coaches, right? As you map this thing out, like, okay, I need to make, you said specifically, Pinkerton always wanted to hire people that wanted to be head coaches, and he trained you to be that. How are you doing that, not just with your coaches, but with your athletes, to build them into leaders?
I think as far as my coaching staff goes, I'm fortunate that 2 of the guys played for me, and that's huge. I think anytime you can get former players to coach in your program really helps, because they can kind of validate to the players what's going on and why we do what we do. And they've kind of been through the trenches with you. Sometimes kids aren't always, they're a little scared of the head coach occasionally, but they can talk to an assistant who's been there. They're very excited, especially a young guy who's kind of more relatable. And I think it's giving the younger coaches the freedom to do certain things, but they understand the context of the program, what you're doing. I'm really blessed to have other coaches that are very young. I have a gentleman right now who coached the junior high and has been with us for the last 8 to 10 years. And once again, his name is Paul Shafto, and he's been tremendous because he knows, once again, what we want. He's able to convey that at the junior high level also. We see his kids there and just having that kind of carryover. And then I think one of the best things is we run a summer camp. And so we have 150 kids come to our camp, and our players are coaches. And that's the highlight of the summer, because they'll come back and say, "Oh, coach, my guys don't listen to me." And it's like, well, now you know how I feel sometimes. And so I think they understand what it takes from our perspective to help coach them up. And by them coaching these, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, they realize it's not easy, and how intentional they have to be, and they have to be on all the time. And it makes them a lot more receptive to our coaching, because they kind of see and they can see our lens for a week. And that's pretty cool to see.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That's always a great experience, where it's just look at them and smile. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking about there. Let me ask this, and I don't know the full number. I know you've had at least one that I do remember, but given where you are and you're located, you've had an opportunity to coach a couple of children of professional athletes. And I'm curious what that experience is like. And more importantly, I'm curious what advice you would have for other coaches that find themselves in that situation, and also potential parents that are listening, where you can frame, some advice there maybe as well.
Yeah, good question. We have been fortunate to have several Kings players play in our program, and it is a little intimidating at first when they kind of come around and you go, "Oh my gosh, I've got so-and-so's son or so-and-so's son in our program." But when you start kind of talking to them, they're just parents also. And they love basketball. And that's the biggest difference. And they want to help. And we've been fortunate, for example, and recently, Bobby Jackson and Doug Christie's sons played in our program. And they were both incredibly supportive. But the best thing is they were willing to come back to our practices especially during open gym in the spring, summertime, and talk to the kids and work with the kids. And if we were trying to work with freshmen on this one skill set, they had no problem working with the freshmen or working with the JVs or working with the girls. And it was just really kind of cool to have an NBA player on campus and for the kids to realize what it takes to get there, but that they're just like you and I, and that they just want to have a conversation and get to know you. But it was fun to hear, for example, one time Bobby Jackson came out and was helping us with pick and roll defense. And it was really kind of enlightening to hear him talk about it and walk through the guys and just how detailed he was in 3 or 4 basic approaches they use in the NBA. And so when he's referencing NBA players, obviously the kids are like, okay. And they're definitely a little more attentive and realize the NBA game is like the high school game. They're just bigger, stronger, faster, but the principles still apply. And I think the parents, it was kind of cool to see the parents kind of gravitate towards that. And they were very respectful also. And they recognize this is kind of a privilege in some respects to have somebody who's played in the NBA work with our kids. Because every kid, I think, aspires to play at that level. And so it's kind of cool to have a conversation with somebody who's played there and been there and gotten through that situation.
Would it be a fair generalization to state that the higher level athletes, children you've coached, the more, let's use the word humble and hands off they were as a parent?
They understood your perspective also. They understood what it meant to be a coach and what you're kind of going through. And they didn't cross the lines. I didn't always do things right, I'm sure, in their eyes or in my own eyes, but they knew we were trying the best. And it was always kind of fun to have conversations after the season. And that was kind of the best part is during the season, they were very hands off. And if I had a question, then they'd engage. And that was one thing I always respected and appreciated. It wasn't, hey, you should do this, hey, you should do this, hey, you should do this. It was, they wait till I initiated the conversation, which I always appreciate.
All right, this next question could be loaded and feel free to pass on it, but because you're in a unique situation, I would love your perspective on this. Watching that, experiencing that, going through that, as other parents within your program and neighboring programs went through it, why do you think, because we don't know, but why do you think if those parents who have performed at the highest level, and some of them coached at the highest level, and they're handing their kids to you and staying out of it, why would you say it's hard for other parents who don't have that experience to then take their modeling and apply it?
I'm gonna say a realistic perspective of things is I think for the pro athletes understand what high school basketball is all about, or high school golf, or high school football is all about. And I think the reality is you're trying to create memories for kids. And that hopefully 10 to 15, 20 years from now, kids will look back and say, you know what, I love this game, or I love this trip. Because the reality is kids don't remember a whole lot of games. They remember the San Diego trip, or the Tahoe trip, or this event here. And I think NBA athletes understand that. And that the AAU circuit has kind of become the time to get seen in more of the college recruiting situation. Whereas high school athletics, is about being part of a team. And that's what I think I really enjoy is this past season. It was kind of fun to see once again, the girls golf team really kind of bought into each other and kind of came together. And our boys basketball team, same thing. We had kind of an up and down season and things weren't kind of going very well. And then all of a sudden things just kind of clicked and all the kids bought in and started playing for each other. And we had a great run and made it to the section finals and got to play a Golden One. And that was just because, but that's the memory kids are always going to have. And I don't think parents understand that sometimes is they think, well, Johnny's not getting 20 in his high school team. He's not going to get a scholarship. Well, high school, I think at the high school level, we can negate a rock star player because we can take 4 or 5 guys, we can deny him the ball and have all the help defense towards him. So it's tough to score 20 points in a high school game. Whereas when you're on your AAU team with, 4 other studs, you can't help off. And so you got a lot more room to work. Mm-hmm. And I don't think parents always understand that is the high school game is designed to be for teams, and we can try our best to take away their best player. Whereas AAU, it's all about the best player having space to get his.
Yeah, and I'd also offer this as a fellow athletic administrator. I tell our families it's part of our mission and vision, but it's look, education-based athletics, which is what we do in schools, is designed to teach leadership, followership, and to learn to be part of something bigger than yourself. And the sport, pick whichever discipline it is a vehicle to teach those things, because those are what is going to serve you in life as an adult and a human being in the way in which we interact in this world. But to your point, when they're out there on the club teams, it's a different energy, it's a different mission. But what we do as high school or educators, right? The we is always at the center of that, because ultimately it's about role definition and how do you interact with other people. And so my follow-up, which goes back to something you said a long time ago, was as a member of the church, you went on a mission and served. And I'm going to wrap this episode up by asking, and not necessarily opening this up to a religious dialogue, but I would love to know what you learned on that mission that still sticks with you today in the way in which you show up in the world and you serve in the capacity that you're in.
I think when you serve a mission, whether it be for your faith or for a group, you learned it's not about you, but it's about everybody else. And you lose yourself in the service of others. And that's what I kind of learned serving 2 years in England was you see people in a variety of circumstances, and really all they want to do is build connections. They want, are you a true friend that will be there when they need you? And how can you serve and help them? Because there is no monetary gain when you're serving a mission. You're just there to help and to serve where needed. And that's, I think, the biggest lesson I've learned is just, that's what the joys of a high school, teaching at a high school, coaching at a high school, you get a chance to serve kids every day and serve adults every day. and to see their growth and to see their progress is amazing. I've been blessed. My oldest son served a mission in Des Moines, Iowa, Spanish speaking. My middle son served in Uruguay, and my daughter just left last week to go serve at Pocatello, Idaho. And so it's exciting for me to see them and see the growth they go through on their mission. And it reminds me why we do what we do, because it ultimately is to serve others. And then if we can get our players to serve each other and have that mindset, you can do some amazing things on a high school campus. We had a young man this past year who broke his ankle, but he still came to every practice. And he's kind of a crowd favorite, a team favorite. But he never missed a practice, never missed a game. And he'd hobble there. And finally, we had senior night, and he was out of a boot. He could kind of hobble around a little bit. And so I said, look, if we have a chance for a baseline out of balance play, we're going to get you in. And towards the end of the game, we're right in front of our student section, and we were able to throw him in there. And he's able to hit a 3 in front of the student section off the baseline out of balance play. And the crowd went wild. He went wild. And we were able to quickly sub him off, fortunately. And that was kind of cool. He said, Coach, I love serving my team and serving my community and serving the kind of fan base, because he's kind of a crowd favorite. And then to do that makes it all worthwhile. He's like, everything I did on this program was worth it for that one shot. To dedicate 4 years of my life, even though I was hurt, hitting that one shot, he'll never forget. And I think that's a great reminder for all of us. The service we do for these kids always comes back.
I don't know that we're going to find a better place to stop than that, Coach. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and sitting with us and sharing your wisdom for all those that are listening.
No, thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do. I know that the podcast has helped many coaches, and it's a great listen, and we love to share. That's one that we talked about a lot. I know Kenny Manfredi teaches out of Franklin here. We've been talking quite a bit, and we already put together a coaching clinic last year, and we're going to do it again this fall, and just trying to get coaches together to communicate, build those relationships up, because that's what it's all about. Is in some respects, all we've got is each other. So hopefully we can be there to support one another.
Absolutely. And you know what? We'll add this to the end of that. Those of you that feel that maybe you're alone in trying to go through this, I've yet to have a coach who I've reached out to say no when I've called them to ask for help or to pick their brain or to get some guidance.
And that's what it's all about. I know I used to love just going around as a young coach, going, out afterwards and just listening to coaches talk, because you can learn from them. They all want to share. And we got to recognize, we don't know everything. We can always learn and find out more.
Absolutely. All right, Coach. Thank you. I'm going to let you get back to your day.
Hey, thank you. Have a great one.